Judge recently temporarily blocked President Trump's administration from withholding funds awarded to 14 states for electric vehicle charger infrastructure. District Judge Tanya Lin ruled that the states were likely to succeed in a lawsuit alleging that the federal government was illegally withholding billions of dollars awarded for building charging stations. For analysis, we welcome Lauren Fix, the founder of Car Coach Reports, which provides the latest news from the automotive world. Lauren, great to see you.
Well, thank you. Yes, this is a huge story. I mean, remember, this is $5 billion of Americans' taxpayer money. And they gifted that money during the Biden administration to put up 500,000 charging stations. As of today, as we're speaking right now, there are 7. So where's the money? And that's the big question. So the Department of Transportation, run by Sean Duffy, said, you know what, it's time to take this back. So they clawed back the money, which they should, because obviously there is reasons, or wherever that money is, it's not being used for the appropriate things. And remember, this is $5 billion. It's a lot of money. It could be used for a lot of other things like roads and bridges, but instead it was designed to put in infrastructure, but it was basically a waste of tax dollars.
I believe it's just a fraction of that billions that have been perhaps clawed back, Lauren. Where exactly has the money been spent so far?
Well, in Indiana, they put up 3 charging stations, and there were 2 in Pennsylvania, and the rest are just randomly around California. So, why would these 14 states, and of course, there are 3 states that didn't win in this lawsuit, that this district judge out of Seattle, Washington, thinks that she's got the power to tell the president what to do with the funds that belong to the American people? So, last week, or actually it was earlier this week, the Supreme Court said, you know what? This is not going to happen. You can't take away the presidential power to power. Was it? I believe it's the second amendment of powers. But the presidential powers, you can't take that away by a district judge. Otherwise, we're going to have 98 different district judges trying to control literally everything for their own personal gain, their own personal interests, or their personal opinions. And all of that is not going to hold up in the court of law. So the Supreme Court said, no, you don't have to follow what these district judges have. You can put a lawsuit in, but they're not going to win.
Lauren, can the states, if they get their hands on this money, can they be required to actually build these charging stations? Do you know?
Well, they were originally designed to be required to build 500,000 charging stations. But because of state and federal regulations that were put in place under the Biden administration, those charging stations never got built. And that's the big problem. So with 7 of them, where's the rest of the money? Because they don't cost $1 billion a piece. And that's really what that divides out to be. And that's a problem. So another part of it is, if you think about it, when gas stations were put up, they weren't put up by the federal government. They were put up by individual companies that were selling gasoline, whether it be oil companies or other industries that just said, we're going to build infrastructure. And then, of course, more spread out. Same thing is true with cell towers. The federal government did not pay for the cell towers. It was AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. They all put up cell towers, and then they created an agreement amongst themselves so everybody could use the cell towers, giving us better cell service. But when the federal government pays for it, it's always a disaster. You look at the post office, you look at Amtrak, anything the federal government runs, including health insurance, has been a mess, because the problem is it's too expensive, too much regulation, and it never gets done properly so that consumers receive the benefit.
Lauren, is it the case that a bunch of these charging stations are perhaps under construction? Are they close to completion? Or, well, why the slow deployment?
No. Well, they all need permits, and the permits come with money. And they slow walked all the permitting across the entire country. When President Trump got into office, he removed a lot of these restrictions. But again, if someone's got the money and you're a company sitting on it, you might be less likely or motivated to do that. So immediately, Sean Duffy approached President Trump. They pulled the money back. And now this district judge, thinks that they can control the money and get it back to these 14 states. What's most likely going to happen is it'll go to court and they'll lose. So it's in the federal government coffers, waiting to be appropriate locations like fixing roads and bridges, for schools, for all the services that we all need, that we're all behind on. All of that can be done. But when it's being wasted with private companies that are never using the money for its appropriate use, that's why the money was brought back to the government. And I think the federal government will win on this.
Lauren, let's talk a little bit about the impact on the consumer themselves. You've been on our show a lot over the past few years. EVs have been a big talking point for the last 4 or 5 years. If these stations are not being built, we hear about this term range anxiety, right? People are so afraid that they're not going to be able to get from A to B because they need to charge their car. Like, what is the future of electric vehicles in America, considering the current administration's perhaps leveling of the playing field when it comes to EV manufacturers and their kind of traditional engine counterparts?
Right. I think what we're going to see as far as electric vehicle charging anxiety, it used to be range anxiety. When we first put electric cars out, oh, I don't know, 200 miles. What if I decide I want to make a road trip? I can't. But now this has all changed. So now what we're looking at is charging anxiety. You get to a charging station. This happened to me personally while I was test driving a vehicle in California. We were in Northern California, wine country, all is beautiful. And there's 3 chargers. I pull up, there's a Tesla charging on one, which is fine. The other 2, one was working, and the other one you plugged in and it said 6 hours. What are you supposed to do in a parking lot for 6 hours on a level 2 charger? And so that causes anxiety for people. I mean, we're all busy. Everybody is. We all have life to live. And you can't do that if you're spending half of it sitting there doing nothing. And in that area, there was a restaurant, but that restaurant was closed. So what are you supposed to do? Just sit outside your car? Sitting in the car may have some medical impacts that no one's talking about yet. I'm hoping that RFK brings that to light, that when you put yourself with all this infrastructure and charging, that you've got magnetic fields, which can cause all kinds of health issues. And that has not been addressed. I'm not a doctor, but I'm sure there are doctors that are well aware of this, and they haven't been speaking out because they were afraid of the past administration. So that's all factors. You can say, well, I'll charge at home. That's great if you want to do that. But again, that tax credit is going away for sure. You're going to lose the $7,500 tax credit that goes away at the end of September. The $4,000 tax credit on used EVs is going away. And the $1,200 tax credit for charging stations in your home, that's going away. So if you're going to charge at home, you're going to have to pay for a charger. It's level 2. I just got an electric car last week. It said you want to use a fast charger. It can be charged up to 80% in 30 minutes. That might work, maybe go to a store. But at home, it said 11 hours. So you have to plan to be at home for 11 hours where your vehicle charges only to 80%. They never charge to 100% because it kills the life of the battery. So while any battery will say, oh, it's good for X amount of miles, it's really only 80% that the vehicle will charge to. Anything above 80% takes much longer, and it also shortens the life of the battery, which means you're going to have an expense coming your way.
So what's the future of electric vehicles in America, especially considering perhaps the technology you're describing may improve in the near future?
I think what you're going to see is it's vehicles that are electric are still going to be around, but I think you're going to see a lot more plug-in hybrids. So you get the best of both worlds, and hybrids, much like think of a Toyota Prius, where you're getting phenomenal fuel economy, 50 miles to the gallon, and you can drive it wherever you want. And so when you're on electric, then that'll be fine. But we do know when this big, beautiful bill passes, there will be a $250 fee for the road use on this is a federal fee, not a state. Each state has its own rules beyond that. $250 for all electric vehicles and $100 for all hybrids and plug-in hybrids. So you will be paying to use the roadways, which we lost that because remember when cars were all gas, or most of them were gas, what would happen is you would pay at the pump. You would get a certain percentage that will add into the cost of per gallon, and that money would go back to the roads and bridges. Unless it's California, they just added even more money to their gas taxes at the 1st of July. And we're expecting to see $8 a gallon gasoline in California. And that's sort of a payback from Governor Gavin Newsom, who's trying to punish people for not buying electric cars. So that will be interesting to watch. A lot of pushback that was passed very secretively in November of last year because Gavin Newsom knew that President Trump would remove the electric vehicle mandate. And so this is sort of a punishment to try and force people to purchase electric cars. I don't think it's going to do that because if you can afford an electric car, you would. But if you're driving an older car and you're on a budget, the last thing you need is a car payment, higher insurance, and finding a place to charge. So that range anxiety goes across whether they're used or new. And a lot of people have found that it doesn't work for them. Having choices is the best thing.
Well, that would be a complete 180 on what we've been hearing around encouraging people to switch to electric over the past, let's say, 4 or 5 years, from subsidies, from help, to actually penalizing them. Lauren, very fascinating. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thanks, Paul.